Hello everyone, you are watching Marriage. What is it? Why is it? Marriage is not something restricted to one religion or one country, and it wasn't invented by governments, pastors, or priests. Marriage is common all over the world, and it appears to have been around for thousands of years. But what is it, and what is it for? Is marriage defined by the way people collectively think of it, or whatever the government claims it is? Is marriage simply an expression of love? Is marriage meant to bind two people together, or is it meant to simply bring them closer together? If we don't know what marriage is, we won't know how to get married, or even why we would. Because of this, I would like to examine two parts of Genesis to see what we can learn about marriage. If Genesis really is a historical account, what Genesis says isn't simply the myths of a society or a religion, and Genesis is then the logical place to look to see what marriage is meant to be. Genesis chapter 2. What could Genesis chapter 2 have to say about marriage? A lot, actually. Here's an overview. 1. It is not good for man to be alone. 2. Woman was formed for man's sake, or in response to man's need. 3. Woman was formed from man. 4. Woman is a suitable helper for man. 5. Animals are not suitable helpers for man. 6. Woman is a suitable companion for man. 7. Animals are not suitable companions for man. 8. Woman is a suitable counterpart for man. 9. Animals are not suitable counterparts for man. 10. Marriage unites inseparably. 11. There was no shame in marriage. Now, I hope you're wondering exactly where I'm getting these statements from, because that's what we'll be talking about next. Man's creation. Let's start with the creation of man, in order to get a clearer picture. Genesis chapter 2, verses 4 through 7 says, "These are the generations of the heavens and of the earth when they were created, in the day that Jehovah God made earth and heaven. And no plant of the field was yet in the earth, and no herb of the field had yet sprung up, for Jehovah God had not caused it to rain upon the earth. And there was not a man to till the ground. But there went up a mist from the earth, and watered the whole face of the ground. And Jehovah God formed a man of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. And man became a living soul." So God formed man from the dust of the ground, or in other words, soil, and breathed life into it. You may be thinking, seriously, God formed man from dirt? Yes, but let's not forget that God also breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. I believe that God probably arranged all of the matter in the way he wanted it in forming man, but his breath is what gave the matter life. This is thousands of times easier to believe than evolution. Let's continue. Man's placement in Eden's garden. Genesis chapter 2, verses 8 and 9 says, "And Jehovah God planted a garden eastward, in Eden, and there he put the man whom he had formed. And out of the ground made Jehovah God to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food, the tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil." Genesis chapter 2, verse 15 says, "And Jehovah God took the man, and put him into the Garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it." So here we can see that the first job man was given was to work and protect Eden's garden. We also see a description of the plant life in the garden, every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food, and two trees of specific importance. God's command and warning. Genesis chapter 2, verses 16 and 17 says, "And Jehovah God commanded the man, saying, Of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it. From the day that thou eatest thereof thou shalt surely die. Here we see the first negative command man was given by God. Do not eat from this tree. What is not good for man? Genesis chapter 2 verses 18 through 20 says, And Jehovah God said, It is not good that the man should be alone. I will make him a help, meet, i.e., suitable for him. And out of the ground Jehovah God formed every beast of the field, and every bird of the heavens, and brought them unto the man to see what he would call them. And whatsoever the man called every living creature, that was the name thereof. And the man gave names to all cattle, and to the birds of the heavens, and to every beast of the field. But for man there was not found a help meet for him. Here we can see that it isn't good for man to be alone. This was my first point. We can also see that the animals God formed in the garden were not suitable helpers for man. This was my fifth point. You may wonder, why does God seem to think animals would be suitable for man? First he states that he would make a help that was suitable for man. Then he forms animals and brings them to man. And finally it states that nothing was found to be a help suitable for him. I'm convinced this isn't what God thought. I think to some degree the animals were formed so man wouldn't be alone. But God knew man really needed a counterpart, not some other kind of creature. First, before the woman was formed, God formed the animals in the garden, brought them to man, and had him name them. This was probably done, at least in part, to show man ahead of time that none of the animals were suitable for him, not done so that God could test their suitability. The first marriage. Genesis chapter 2 verses 22 through 25 says, And Jehovah God caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs, and closed up the flesh instead thereof. And the rib, which Jehovah God had taken from the man, made, or in other words formed, he a woman, and brought her unto the man. And the man said, This is now bone of my bones, and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. And they were both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed. We see here, because of what it says in verse 18, that woman was formed in direct response to man's need, and that woman was formed from man, from his rib or side. This is my second and third point. We see, again because of verse 18, that woman is a suitable helper and companion for man, the fourth and sixth point. We see that the animals in the garden weren't suitable companions, as in good enough companions for man, because God formed woman to be a companion for man, the seventh point. We also see here that marriage unites inseparably because of the phrases, This is now bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh, and Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. The 10th point. Jesus made this even clearer in Matthew chapter 19, verses 3 through 12. We see that woman is a suitable counterpart for man, not the same thing as a suitable companion, because man and woman become one flesh. The 8th point. We see that animals are not suitable counterparts to man, because God formed woman to be man's counterpart. The 9th point. Finally, we see that there was no shame in this union of man and woman. The 11th point. Pop quiz. Forgetting any preconceived ideas, what does Genesis chapter 2 seem to tell us about the main reason for marriage? Genesis chapter 2 verse 18 implies that the first reason for marriage is companionship and partnership. You may say, if this is true, where do the children come in? We should never confuse marriage with family. Marriage is between a man and a woman. It has nothing to do with children. Family is different and would include any children from the time they're conceived. The first marriage consisted of two people, Adam and Eve. The first family consisted of two people at first, but then included more. Adam and Eve at first, and later on their children as well. The first extended family included even more people, Adam and Eve, their children, grandchildren, and so on. Essentially, marriage forms a new family, yet marriage is different than family. Jacob's wives. Biblical polygamy. Now, you may be wondering, okay, so you've shown in Genesis 2 that man and woman are suitable helpers, companions, and counterparts. And you've also shown that the first reason for marriage is this partnership. But what about marrying more than one wife? Or several men and women marrying each other? The fact that the first marriage was between one man and one woman strongly suggests that marriage should always be between one man and one woman. But let's look at an example of biblical polygamy just to see what we can see. 2 wives. In Genesis chapter 29, verses 15 through 30, it says, And Laban said unto Jacob, Because thou art my brother, shouldest thou therefore serve me for naught? Tell me, what shall thy wages be? And Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. And Leah's eyes were tender, but Rachel was beautiful and well-favored. And Jacob loved Rachel, and he said, I will serve thee 7 years for Rachel thy younger daughter. And Laban said, It is better that I give her to thee, than that I should give her to another man. Abide with me. And Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed unto him but a few days, for the love he had to her. And Jacob said unto Laban, Give me my wife, for my days are fulfilled, that I may go in unto her. And Laban gathered together all the men of the place, and made a feast. And it came to pass in the evening, that he took Leah his daughter, and brought her to him, and he went in unto her. And Laban gave Zilpah his handmaid unto his daughter Leah for a handmaid. And it came to pass in the morning that, behold, it was Leah. And he said to Laban, What is this thou hast done unto me? Did not I serve with thee for Rachel? Wherefore then hast thou beguiled me? And Laban said, It is not so done in our place to give the younger before the firstborn. Fulfill the week of this one, and we will give thee the other also for the service which thou shalt serve with me yet 7 other years. And Jacob did so, and fulfilled her week, and he gave him Rachel his daughter to wife. And Laban gave to Rachel his daughter Bilhah his handmaid to be her handmaid. And he went in also unto Rachel, and he loved also Rachel more than Leah, and served with him yet 7 other years. We can see that Jacob was tricked into marrying Leah, but then he proceeded on to marry Rachel as well, as he originally intended. Even though Jacob's original intentions were not polygamous, he later chose polygamy because he was tricked into marrying the wrong sister. Another thing we can see here is that Leah and Rachel were not married to each other. They were each separately married to Jacob at different times. This is an important point because it illustrates that even in polygamy, there can still be the same basic marriage structure that's in monogamy. One man and one woman equals a marriage. Jacob had 2 marriages at the same time, not one marriage with 2 wives. Marital problems and concubines. In Genesis chapter 30, verses 1 through 13, it says, And when Rachel saw that she bare Jacob no children, Rachel envied her sister. And she said unto Jacob, Give me children, or else I die. And Jacob's anger was kindled against Rachel, and he said, Am I in God's stead, who hath withheld from thee the fruit of the womb? And she said, Behold, my maid Bilhah, go in unto her, that she may bear upon my knees, and I also may obtain children by her. And she gave him Bilhah her handmaid to wife, and Jacob went in unto her. And Bilhah conceived, and bare Jacob a son. And Rachel said, God hath judged me, and hath also heard my voice, and hath given me a son. Therefore called she his name Dan. And Bilhah Rachel's handmaid conceived again, and bare Jacob a second son. And Rachel said, With mighty wrestlings have I wrestled with my sister, and have prevailed. And she called his name Naphtali. When Leah saw that she had left off bearing, she took Zilpah her handmaid, and gave her to Jacob to wife. And Zilpah, Leah's handmaid, bare Jacob a son. And Leah said, Fortunate, and she called his name Gad. And Zilpah, Leah's handmaid, bare Jacob a second son. And Leah said, Happy am I, for the daughters will call me happy. And she called his name Asher. It's clear that Jacob's marriages to Leah and Rachel caused problems between them. This rivalry might have been more severe because the women were sisters, but there is at least one other rivalry between two co-wives mentioned in Scripture, and these women wouldn't have been sisters because of what it says in Leviticus chapter 18, verse 18. You can find the story in 1 Samuel chapter 1. These problems largely stem from the fact that marriage unites two people together, hence the phrase, bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh, Genesis chapter 2, verse 23. Because of this, polygamy isn't very graceful. When he married his wives' handmaidens, Jacob then had two primary wives and two secondary wives, also called concubines. Again, I want to point out that even though so many marriages seem to blur together, Jacob had 4 separate marriages, not one marriage with 4 wives. Looking at it from the other perspective, each of Jacob's wives were only married to Jacob, and so each had one marriage to the same man. More about polygamy. An important distinction needs to be made here. There are 2 kinds of polygamy. 1, polygamy and polyandry, and 2, polygamous marriage. Jacob had more than one wife, so he would rightly be called a polygamist. However, his polygamy is different than what people may think of when they hear the word. The polygamy of the Bible is, more precisely, polygyny, which is to have multiple wives. The counterpart to polygamy is polyandry, which is to have multiple husbands. Both polygyny and polyandry are similar forms of polygamy, in that they both consist of multiple marriages. We can clearly see this when the wives or husbands are not married to each other in this relationship, and each marriage occurs at different times. Another form of polygamy is polygamous marriage, which is a single marriage involving more than 2 people. So all the men and the women would be married to each other within a single supposed marriage. The question to ask then is this: does this polygamy embrace the idea of a 2-person marriage? And does this polygamy embrace the idea of a man-woman marriage? If so, it's polygyny or polyandry, and actually involves multiple marriages. If not, it's a single polygamous marriage. Finally, I want to reaffirm that marriage should always be between one man and one woman, and that everyone should only be married once, unless death ends the marriage. Anyone who disagrees with this must give an equal or better explanation for the words in Genesis 2 than I have, an explanation which also makes room for their own beliefs, or give a valid reason for rejecting what Genesis chapter 2 says. Anyone who believes that polygyny and or polyandry is a good thing must come to terms with Jesus' words in Matthew chapter 19, verse 9. Should a man or woman give only part of himself or herself to one spouse in marriage and part to another? If marriage makes 2 people one flesh, polygyny and polyandry splits people into pieces, one part for each spouse. I can see why there could be tension in such a marriage. Summary. As recorded in Matthew chapter 19, verses 4 through 6, Jesus, who I consider to be the final authority on marriage, put it this way when some Pharisees questioned him about divorce. Have ye not read that he who made them from the beginning made them male and female, and said, For this cause shall a man leave his father and mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and the 2 shall become one flesh? So that they are no more 2, but one flesh. What therefore God hath joined together, let no man put asunder. Jesus also said, verse 9, And I say unto you, whosoever shall put away his wife, except for fornication, and shall marry another, committeth adultery. And he that marrieth her when she is put away committeth adultery. As for the purpose of marriage, Genesis chapter 2 verse 18 says, And Jehovah God said, It is not good that the man should be alone. I will make him a help meet for him.